I'm excited to be here with probably the person who knows the most about downtown revitalization in the entire state of North Carolina, Liz Parham. Liz, talk a little bit about what it is you do to support communities like Kinston that are seeking to revitalize their downtown.
Sure. Well, we offer at the Department of Commerce a lot of strategic planning opportunities for communities like Kinston. So we go in and look at their assets and help them really identify where some great opportunities are that they can really expand on and develop for their downtown so that they have a strong, healthy downtown, not only for the citizens, but also for visitors. In the case of Kinston, for a town that really is dependent on a lot of visitors coming in as well, so that they can be strong and healthy for years to come.
And how important is a strong, vibrant downtown to a community's sense of place?
Well, it's actually everything. The uniqueness of a community is really centered around the downtown, the unique architecture, the unique businesses, the unique memories that we have about our downtown districts. You don't find that at a strip center or a mall even. And so having that strong downtown is the basis for economic development moving forward, whether it's small business development, strip center development, or even industrial development. It starts at the downtown district.
So I assume that must always have been true, and yet it feels to me that there's a new buzz around downtowns that feels much more exaggerated than it had been in the past. In fact, many downtowns for decades saw people fleeing and boarded up windows replacing businesses. So what gives? Why is it so cool to be downtown again?
It's partially a combination of baby boomers kind of returning to their downtown districts, but it's also millennials that want the same thing that the baby boomers do. They want that convenience of living close to town, walking to a restaurant, walking to a coffee shop, having those amenities, having the cultural amenities in downtown. There is definitely a resurgence around that. We've been doing this for nearly 40 years in North Carolina. But the growth is just getting more and more vibrant in every community that we work in.
And how do you measure that sense of buzz? Is it the number of times your phone rings? Is it the amount of investment that you see going into downtowns?
Yeah,
help us quantify.
Sure. We measure it through investment, both public and private. We measure it through the number of jobs, through the number of businesses that are opening, through the number of residential units that are opening up in downtowns to have new options for people, for places for people to live. Last year alone, we saw $230 million in investment, and we've seen nearly $3 billion in North Carolina since the start of the program back in 1980.
Wow. You've mentioned residential units, and this feels, again, to be a slightly different chapter in downtown revitalization. I don't want to pick on them, but since they're not in North Carolina, I'll pick on Atlanta. There was a time when Atlanta had a really vibrant business district downtown from 8 to 5.
Right.
But nobody lived there.
Right, right.
When did all of that change?
It really started changing probably about 15 years ago, but has really gotten strong over the last 5 to 10 years. Almost every town that has residential in their downtown, it's full all the time. It's you build it and they will come scenario almost, which is great. We have some downtowns like New Bern that has nearly 400 units, and Morganton has 200 people living in downtown. Actually, a little bit more than that, about 300 people living in downtown now. So communities like that are really investing in those units, investing in places for people to live, know that that changes the dynamics of a downtown. So it's no longer a 8 to 5 or a 9 to 6, but the hours are extended with the restaurants, with the bars, with the opportunities for people to just gather.
Kinston makes great fanfare of their art community. How important is art and culture to creating a sense of a community living room downtown?
Yeah, it's really important. really, if you can not just say that we're going to have an economic development strategy around arts and culture, but dive in a little deeper. What kind of art? What kind of culture? You know, in Kinston, it's the African American Music Trail that's really been the basis for a number of their projects in the downtown district, and it helps to create that identity, that individuality for a community, and it's a drawing card.
You mentioned earlier the importance of looking at your own assets, and I assume that that's incredibly important when you think about your arts and culture strategy.
Oh,
There's got to
absolutely.
be some authenticity around it. Tell us about how communities begin to think through what their particular dimension
Sure.
might be in this area.
Sure. Well, you know, that's one of the things that we facilitate with communities is to help them really think through arts and cultural assets, governmental assets, educational assets, institutional assets, all of those different types of assets, and then to drill in deeper. So if you're in Mount Airy, one of their cultural assets is the old-timey music. Well, that's not typical for Kinston by
Right,
any
right.
means. It's the blues culture there. And so helping them to really understand you know, what's unique about their assets and how you use that as an economic development strategy to then enhance the physical appearance of the downtown, promote and market the assets, attract new businesses, and just bring people together in the downtown.
Does size matter? Are there places that are really too small because downtown is one street?
Yeah.
Or do you just scale based on your size?
You do scale. You know, one of our real success stories is Warrenton in Warren County. They're a town of 800 people and they're having tremendous success. Another one is Hayesville in Clay County. You know, again, great projects coming out of some of these really small towns. You do have to scale and you have to really look probably a little bit more at those really small communities about who's going to really take that charge, who's the champion. Champions matter. Champions are a real key to downtown redevelopment.
So I want to talk about that a little bit because
Sure.
one of the important things that we hope come from this ncIMPACT series is that people understand who does what to
Right.
get things started. So who are these champions typically?
Well, you know, it's funny. We've had a Main Street Champions program in North Carolina, and we have nearly 1,000 designated champions around the state.
Wow.
But if you look at that aspect, those champions are governmental leaders and Main Street directors. They're local business owners and property owners. They're developers. They're anyone that really takes the leadership role in downtown development, and that's a little bit different in every community that's around in our programs. But the key is finding who is really going to make the effort, who's going to take the charge.
So I hear you saying champion isn't really defined by your formal title.
No.
It's defined by what you do, how much passion
Absolutely.
you have.
Absolutely, passion's key.
So a civic leader watching this says,
Yeah.
you know, if all these places you've named can develop their downtown, so can we. What's the first thing they ought to do even before they call you?
You know, we always tell communities when you're looking to start a downtown revitalization program, you really have to understand your product. So you have to understand kind of what the makeup of your downtown is. Is it one street or is it 8 streets? Is it 10 buildings or is it 150 buildings? Who owns those buildings? What kind of condition are you dealing with? And then we can come in and start delving into those assets and looking at the economic drivers and helping a community to identify economic development strategies that they can really move forward. You know, the smaller communities might have one strategy. The bigger communities might have 3 strategies that they're working on, all at the same time, but it's making a huge difference in our downtowns.
And of course, every champion is interested in private sector investments. That's
sure.
what everybody's looking for.
Sure.
But how much critical mass do you need to have before you can actually begin to attract outside investors?
You know, we know that most of the time the investment is going to come from the region. Now, that's not exclusively true. There's certainly times where, you know, there's going to be regional investment or an outside investor that just loves that community. We've seen investments in Salisbury, for example, that came out of California because they saw a marketing piece. You know, but those times are very rare. It's usually someone that's local, that's regional, that has an interest in the community already and wants to make that investment, wants to make a change.
So one of the things about the Kinston story that's so interesting is some of their investment came from people who grew up in Kinston, who came back to Kinston.
Yeah.
How often do you see that?
You know, we're seeing that more and more, actually. Again, it's that kind of concept of millennials want to return home, want to be a part of the communities that they grew up in, and want to make a difference. And that's really happening in all of our communities. It's not happening in large numbers by any means, but it is happening, and those people are often the champions that we're seeing.
So how lovely is that?
Oh, well, it's
for
great.
So long people said, I just want my community to be a place that my children will come home to.
Right.
And now it turns out they're coming home.
Absolutely.
And really transforming.
Absolutely. And, you know, again, I think the Kinston story is a great example of that, with some of the champion families that are there that are making that investment. But, you know, we're also seeing a number of really creative millennials that are developing businesses in Morganton, for example, that are not necessarily from there, but they like that aspect of a small, walkable community that they can live close to town and enjoy the amenities that the town offers.
And how do communities then market themselves to people who might be looking for these kinds of living opportunities but don't come from a place?
You know, it's a pretty comprehensive marketing approach that is telling the story about their assets, telling and developing those promotional opportunities, those special events, but it's also identifying where those development opportunities are and marketing and promoting those. And that's a real key. It's interesting, we've seen several really creative promotional activities come out of some of our towns lately. One in Goldsboro, one in Hendersonville come to mind, that they promoted the upper story residential opportunities that are in downtown. So again, you know, housing always comes first. You don't move to a place to open a business unless you know where you're going to live, typically.
It's a really good bit of advice for people who are thinking through this strategy.
Yeah.
A lot exciting and positive happening around downtown development. But there are some aspects that sometimes create tensions in communities. By definition, change sometimes creates winners and losers. So can we talk a little bit about some of the downsides and how you prepare communities so that they mitigate some of the downsides from the outset?
Yeah, you know, we talk to communities about for a community to grow, they have to change. But communities have to change at the rate that they're able to change. And so I think the tension really comes in when a community is trying to change faster than perhaps the citizens are ready for it to change. And also the dynamic in, for example, in the western part of the state, where the Atlanta market is moving into all of western North Carolina and bringing lots of new ideas. And a lot of the citizens that are from western North Carolina don't necessarily want that change. So there's definitely some tension there. It's having a local government and nonprofit organizations like often we work with, helping to manage that change at a rate that's slow enough yet fast enough, if you know what I mean.
Yep. So one of the things that sometimes happens with this change is people who occupy downtown, sometimes artists, sometimes low-income individuals, for whom downtown was the option when no one else wanted to be downtown, find themselves now being sort of closed out or priced out. Of downtown. Are there things that communities can do at the outset to try to manage that?
Yeah, well, again, it's helping to identify the best spaces for different types of businesses. So, you know, we always talk about, if you really know your product, if you know your buildings and you know the conditions, retail needs to be on the main street, whatever the main street is, because they need the foot traffic. But if it's an accountant They don't need to be on Main Street. Maybe they're better suited for a side street where maybe the rent's lower, maybe it's not. But certainly there's more parking. There's always tensions on what kind of parking needs community or businesses have, and how you're going to manage that. How are you going to manage those rent rates? Knowing the product, knowing where to help place businesses really helps.
What are you telling communities who looking 10, 15 years down the road about parking? Should they be worried about building parking lots, or will self-driving cars and new business models of transportation totally take care of that?
That's a really good question. We call parking the P word. And the reality is, again, with multimodal, more people are walking and biking. And again, the more walkable you can make your community, the less need you have for as much parking per se. We're always going to need parking. There are certain individuals within populations that are going to drive to downtown. Some are going to drive to one block and then get back in the car and drive to the next block. We know this, but managing that so that the business owners aren't taking up that valuable on-street parking opportunity, moving them to side streets or off-street parking really helps to manage. Managing parking is a real key to downtown, but it's one that a lot of communities don't really want to take the time to do.
Yeah.
It's time consuming.
Indeed it is. And of course, for the visitor to downtown, it can be really time consuming.
Absolutely.
If you haven't thought about
Absolutely.
your parking in a meaningful way. Liz, what have I not asked you that you'd really like to say? You'd want civic leaders to understand as they get into this work?
Well, I want them to understand that, we have 90 communities that are actively involved with our Main Street programs here in North Carolina, but any community can be involved with downtown redevelopment work, whether you're in Main Street or not. The principles still apply. It's who's going to be that champion, what are your assets, how do you develop those assets into an economic development strategy, and then how do you implement that to make those changes in your community.
Liz, thank you so much for being with us.
Yeah, thank you. I enjoyed it.